They were the kind of family people envied, successful, loving, and seemingly perfect. Quincy Hayes was a renowned surgeon, a man dedicated to saving lives, and a devoted father who would do anything to protect his children. His wife, Aaliyah, was his rock, and together they built a life that looked flawless from the outside. But beneath the surface of their picture-perfect existence, a nightmare was unfolding, one so dark, so unspeakable, that it would drive a man sworn to heel into an act of unthinkable violence. It started with a suspicion, a gut feeling that something wasn't right. Caleb, their 9-year-old autistic son, had changed. His laughter faded, replaced by fear. His once bright eyes now held something haunting, something Quincy couldn't ignore. And then came the discovery, the undeniable proof of a betrayal so vile, so monstrous, that it shattered everything Quincy thought he knew about justice, about morality, about himself. How does a man trained to preserve life become a killer? What happens when the need for justice turns into a hunger for vengeance? Tonight, we unravel the chilling case of Quincy Hayes, a father who took matters into his own hands when faced with the ultimate betrayal. But was it righteous fury, or murder? Before we dive into this disturbing case, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Inspector Stan, where we expose the darkest truths behind love, lies, and betrayal. Quincy Hayes was the embodiment of success, a man who had dedicated his life to medicine, saving countless lives in the operating room. His skills as a surgeon were unmatched, earning him national recognition and respect within the medical community. But beyond the prestige of his career, Quincy was a devoted husband and father. To those who knew him, he was not just a healer but a man who cherished his family above all else. His wife, Aaliyah, was his partner in every sense of the word, strong, intelligent, and fiercely protective of their children. Together, they built a life that was the envy of many. Their 14-year-old daughter, Gabrielle, was bright and ambitious, excelling in school and embodying the promise of her parents' hard work. And then there was Caleb, their 10-year-old youngest, a sweet and gentle boy who saw the world differently than most. Diagnosed with autism at an early age, Caleb's journey came with challenges, but Quincy and Aaliyah ensured he had everything he needed: love, support, and the best care money could provide. To help with Caleb's unique needs, they hired Nia Carter, a 27-year-old young woman who seemed perfect for the job. Warm, patient, and experienced in working with children on the spectrum, Nia quickly became an essential part of their household. The Hayes family welcomed her into their home with open arms, trusting her completely. To outsiders, their lives appeared idyllic, a beautiful family, thriving in their careers and personal lives, with a carefully curated image that exuded perfection. Their presence on social media only reinforced this perception. Quincy and Aaliyah shared moments of love and joy, family vacations, celebratory milestones, and candid glimpses into their seemingly unshakable bond. They were the couple everyone admired, the family people wished they had. But behind the carefully crafted illusion of perfection, something sinister lurked in the shadows. While the world saw a father who had everything, Quincy was about to come face to face with a truth so horrific that it would shatter his perfect life, and turn him into something he never imagined he could become. Nia Carter had always been a master of reinvention. To the Hayes family, she was a devoted caregiver, patient, attentive, and full of warmth. But beneath her carefully constructed image lay a troubled past she had spent years burying. Before coming into their home, Nia had drifted from one job to another, never quite settling anywhere for long. She had been fired from multiple caregiving positions, though the reasons remained unclear. Some former employers described her as unreliable, while others hinted at inappropriate behavior, though no formal accusations were ever made. Her relationships were just as unstable, short-lived and often ending in chaos. She had a way of making people trust her, only to leave destruction in her wake. But when she interviewed with Quincy and Aaliyah, she played the part perfectly, saying all the right things, masking whatever darkness lurked beneath the surface. At first, Nia appeared to be everything they had hoped for. Caleb responded well to her, and she quickly integrated herself into their daily routine. Aaliyah saw her as a blessing, someone who could provide the additional care and attention Caleb needed while she and Quincy balanced their demanding schedules. Even Quincy, always cautious, felt reassured by her presence. But as time passed, subtle changes began to emerge. Caleb, once a child full of curiosity and innocent joy, began to withdraw. The laughter that used to echo through their home became less frequent. His once vibrant energy dimmed, replaced by an unusual nervousness. He flinched at unexpected touches, his sleep became restless, and he avoided eye contact more than usual. He started having unexplained meltdowns, far beyond his usual struggles with overstimulation. At first, Quincy and Aaliyah attributed it to growing pains, perhaps stress from school or an adjustment phase. Autism could be unpredictable, and they tried to reassure themselves that it was just another hurdle they would overcome together. But the signs kept adding up, subtle yet impossible to ignore. Quincy, ever the observer, noticed something strange about the way Caleb reacted to Nia. The once trusting bond between them seemed to shift. Caleb would hesitate before speaking to her, his body tensing whenever she entered the room. Sometimes, he would completely avoid her gaze, as if afraid of something unseen. Yet, whenever Quincy questioned Nia about it, she always had an answer. "He's just having a rough week," she would say with a soft smile. "You know how it is with kids like him, sometimes they regress before they move forward." Her explanations were always so reasonable, so reassuring, that Quincy forced himself to believe them. After all, Nia was the professional, wasn't she? She had been with them for months, earned their trust. Aaliyah certainly wasn't worried, so why should he be? But deep down, something gnawed at Quincy. A father's instinct. A creeping suspicion that something was terribly, terribly wrong. He just didn't know how dark the truth really was. Not yet. The gnawing suspicion had become unbearable. Quincy couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that Caleb's withdrawal and distress weren't just a phase. He needed answers, and he needed proof. A part of him prayed he was wrong, that his paranoia was unfounded. But another part, the part that had spent years as both a father and a surgeon, knew better. One evening, after putting Caleb to bed, Quincy took matters into his own hands. Under the guise of updating their home security system, he installed a small hidden camera in Caleb's room, one discreet enough that Nia wouldn't notice. He told himself it was just for peace of mind, a way to monitor Caleb's habits and see if there was anything unusual triggering his behavior. For the first few nights, there was nothing. Nia followed her usual routine, reading to Caleb, tucking him in, maintaining the illusion of care. Quincy almost convinced himself that he had overreacted, that his fears were unfounded. But then, on the fourth night, everything changed. It was past midnight when Quincy sat in his study, reviewing the footage. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant, but he forced himself to press play. The screen flickered to life, showing Nia entering Caleb's room. But what unfolded next was something he never could have prepared for, something that made his blood turn ice cold. Nia wasn't just neglecting Caleb. She was assaulting him in the worst way imaginable. Quincy's breath caught in his throat as he watched the horrifying scene unfold in front of him. His son, his innocent, vulnerable child, being subjected to unimaginable abuse at the hands of the woman they had trusted. Quincy's entire world collapsed in an instant. The video blurred as rage overtook him, his hands trembling so violently that he nearly knocked the laptop off his desk. His mind screamed in denial, but the evidence was right there, playing on a loop in front of him. And then, another bombshell. A doctor by profession, Quincy had already been troubled by Caleb's recent health changes. The fatigue, the weight loss, the unexplained illnesses, things he had initially attributed to stress or dietary issues. But now, with the horrifying truth staring back at him, his worst fear began to take shape. He rushed to their home office, digging through Caleb's most recent medical tests. His vision blurred as he scanned the reports. Then he saw it. The test results confirming his deepest nightmare. Caleb had tested positive for HIV. Quincy staggered back, bile rising in his throat. The pieces snapped together in a grotesque puzzle that he wished he could unsee. Nia hadn't just hurt his son, she had ruined his life in a way that could never be undone. The weight of it all crushed him. He gasped for air, his entire body trembling as he sank into the chair. His heart pounded violently, rage building inside him like an inferno. Every fiber of his being screamed for vengeance. At that moment, Quincy Hayes was no longer just a father. He was a man who had been pushed to the edge, teetering on the brink of an unspeakable darkness. And soon, Nia Carter would come face to face with the monster she had created. The sun had barely risen when Quincy made his decision. Sleep had evaded him completely, leaving only the raw, pulsing rage that coursed through his veins. He had spent the night staring at the footage, replaying it in his mind until it burned into his soul, until every breath he took felt like poison. There was no room for hesitation. There was no turning back. Nia arrived that morning as if nothing had happened, her usual false smile plastered on her face. She moved through the house with ease, unaware that the walls were closing in around her. But Quincy was waiting. He stood in the living room, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Aaliyah had already left for work, Gabrielle was at school, and Caleb remained asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware of what was about to unfold. When Nia finally noticed Quincy's presence, she paused. Something in his expression made her uneasy. "Morning, Dr. Hayes," she greeted, forcing a polite smile. "Everything okay?" Quincy didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and pressed play. The room filled with the horrific sounds of the previous night, the sickening proof of her crimes. Nia's smile faltered. She took a small step back, her face draining of color. I don't know what this is, don't." Quincy's voice was low, eerily calm, but his hands trembled with rage. "Don't lie to me." For a moment, she tried. She stammered, grasping at whatever excuses she could find, her voice shaking under the weight of his fury. But the moment Quincy's eyes locked onto hers, unrelenting, murderous, she knew there was no way out. Her composure shattered. "I had no choice," she whispered desperately. "You don't understand, my past, the things I've been through." Quincy lunged. The force of his grip sent them both stumbling back, Nia's hands clawing at his wrists, gasping for air as his fingers wrapped around her throat. Her struggles were frantic at first, but Quincy didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The images of Caleb. His son, his innocent, defenseless child, flashed in his mind like a never-ending nightmare. Nia's face turned red, then purple, her nails digging deep into his skin in a final, desperate attempt to free herself. But Quincy only tightened his grip. Her body convulsed. Then, finally, she went still. The silence was deafening. Quincy staggered back, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. His hands were still curled into fists, his fingers still tingling with the sensation of her skin. Nia Carter lay crumpled at his feet, lifeless. The monster who had destroyed his son was gone. But so was the man he used to be. Panic set in quickly. He had acted on instinct, on raw, unfiltered vengeance, but now the weight of reality came crashing down on him. He had crossed a line, one that could never be undone. His mind raced, trying to piece together his next move. Dragging her body was harder than he anticipated. Nia was small, but dead weight was unforgiving. He gritted his teeth as he hauled her through the back door, every muscle in his body burning as he dragged her across the yard. The woods behind their estate were dense, the kind of place no one ventured without reason. It would have to do. Quincy worked quickly, shoveling dirt, his mind blank as his body moved on autopilot. With every scoop, the reality of his actions sank deeper. When the last handful of soil covered her face, he stepped back, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temples. It was done. But as he turned back toward the house, a single, horrifying thought gnawed at the edges of his consciousness. Quincy sat in his home office, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. His pulse pounded in his ears, drowning out every rational thought. He had spent the last few hours pacing, wiping down surfaces, making sure there wasn't a single trace of what had happened. But no amount of planning could erase the fact that he had killed someone. And now, he had to lie to the police. With a deep breath, he steadied himself and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Quincy forced his voice to crack, injecting just enough panic to sound convincing. It's about my son's nanny, Nia Carter. She's missing. The dispatcher's voice remained calm, methodical. When was the last time you saw her? He swallowed hard, glancing toward the back door, the same one he had dragged her body through just hours earlier. Last night. She left the house late, and we haven't heard from her since. She was supposed to be here this morning, but she never showed up. Have you tried contacting her? Yes, Quincy said, his voice breaking at the right moment. No answer. This isn't like her. I don't know what to do. The dispatcher assured him that officers would be sent over to take a formal report. Quincy ended the call and exhaled sharply, his hands trembling. He had just set things into motion. It wasn't long before two officers arrived at the house. Quincy met them at the door, his face carefully composed into an expression of controlled worry. He knew how to play this part. Years of experience as a surgeon had taught him how to remain calm under pressure. We're here regarding Nia Carter, one officer said, stepping inside. Can you tell us more about her disappearance? Quincy nodded and launched into his pre-rehearsed story. He told them how Nia had been a devoted nanny, how she had always been responsible, and how she had left the house unexpectedly the night before. He painted a picture of concern, a father desperate for answers. Aaliyah, completely unaware of what had truly happened, played her part unknowingly. She clutched her robe tightly around herself, worry etched into her features. She's been with us for a while, she said. This isn't like her. Do you think something happened to her? The officers took down notes, asking about Nia's recent behavior, her relationships, her mental state. Quincy provided just enough details to make it seem like he was cooperating without over-explaining. He knew that the more information he volunteered, the riskier it became. Do you have any security cameras on the property? One officer finally asked. Quincy's stomach twisted. Of course, they'd ask. He had already wiped everything, except for the hidden camera in Caleb's room, which he had stashed away. That footage was his leverage, his proof that he had done what any father would have. Our security system covers the front and back entrances, he said carefully. I can pull up the footage for you. The officers nodded, but something in their expressions made his skin crawl. They weren't entirely convinced. At first, the police approached Nia's disappearance as a routine missing person case. They canvassed the neighborhood, questioned friends, and checked hospitals. But something about the situation didn't sit right. When detectives looked deeper into Nia's background, they found a complicated past, job losses, strained relationships, gaps in her employment history. There were no immediate red flags, but there was a pattern of instability. Then came the interviews with Caleb's teachers and therapists. The investigators learned that Caleb's behavior had changed drastically over the last few months, his anxiety, his sudden fear of physical contact, his emotional withdrawal. His therapist had noted that he had been exhibiting signs of trauma. And then, there was Quincy himself. The respected, mild-mannered surgeon, admired by so many, was beginning to crack under pressure. His initial concern was convincing, but as the days dragged on, something in his demeanor shifted. He was restless, tense, his responses too measured. The perfect family man was hiding something. And the detectives were determined to find out what. The media swarmed the case like vultures, eager to dissect every detail of Nia Carter's disappearance and the seemingly perfect life of the Hayes family. Headlines painted conflicting narratives. Some called it a tragic case of justice gone too far, while others speculated that Quincy was hiding something darker beneath his respectable facade. News stations replayed footage of Quincy and Aaliyah at charity events, their smiling faces now tainted by the growing cloud of suspicion. Social media exploded with debates. Some sympathized with Quincy, arguing that any father would have reacted the same way after discovering such a horrific truth. Others condemned him, saying that no amount of pain justified taking a life. As the investigation deepened, authorities made a breakthrough. Hidden within the house, they found the secret camera Quincy had installed in Caleb's room. The footage was damning. There, in horrifying clarity, was the proof of Nia's abuse. The revelation sent shockwaves through the case, forcing the public to reevaluate everything they thought they knew. For many, it justified Quincy's rage. For law enforcement, it raised more questions than answers. If Quincy had the proof of Nia's crimes, why hadn't he gone to the police? Why had he chosen violence instead? Investigators meticulously pieced together Quincy's state of mind leading up to Nia's disappearance. They noted the growing distress in his medical records, sleepless nights, anxiety, erratic behavior at work. His colleagues recalled how he had become increasingly withdrawn in the days before Nia went missing. And then there were the inconsistencies in his statements. The timeline of events wasn't adding up. Forensic teams scoured the property, searching for anything that might confirm their suspicions. It wasn't long before they found what they were looking for. Buried deep in the wooded area behind the estate, they uncovered Nia's decomposing body. The once missing Nanny was now the center of a homicide investigation. And Quincy Hayes, the brilliant surgeon and devoted father, was no longer just a concerned employer. He was now the prime suspect in a murder case that had captivated the nation. Quincy's trial became a spectacle, attracting media attention from all corners. The courtroom buzzed with tension as legal experts and the public debated whether his actions could be justified by the unimaginable horror that had been inflicted upon his son. On one side, Quincy's defense team argued that his decision to kill Nia was the result of overwhelming grief and blind rage after discovering the abuse. They painted a picture of a father pushed to the brink by the violation of his innocent child, claiming that, in that moment, his capacity for rational thought had been consumed by emotion. On the other hand, the prosecution hammered home the point that Quincy was a trained surgeon, a man who had spent his life saving others and maintaining composure under extreme stress. They argued that his actions were an unlawful overstep, a crime of passion that could not be excused by the horrors he had learned of. He should have sought legal justice for Nia's crimes, not taken matters into his own hands. The case took on a new layer of complexity with the testimony of Caleb's medical team. Child abuse experts took the stand to explain the lasting effects of the trauma Nia had inflicted on the young boy, now HIV positive. The emotional and psychological scars would follow Caleb for the rest of his life, no matter how much love and care he received from his family moving forward. The image of a loving, protective father began to clash with the reality of the irreversible harm done to his son. Public opinion became increasingly divided. Some still saw Quincy's actions as those of a broken man avenging the horrors done to his child. Others questioned whether he had gone too far, asking if justice could ever truly be served by taking a life in return for a life ruined. After days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict: Quincy Hayes was found guilty of manslaughter. The jury argued that while his actions were fueled by emotion and grief, they could not overlook the fact that he had killed in a moment of intense passion without consideration for the law. Quincy's plea for leniency fell on deaf ears. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, a far cry from the freedom he once had as a respected surgeon. His career, his reputation, and his family's future were shattered in an instant. Aaliyah, once the proud wife of a beloved doctor, was left to pick up the pieces of her broken family. Caleb's future, already clouded by the trauma of abuse, was now further complicated by the arrest and conviction of his father. The family that had once been seen as the epitome of success and love now stood as a fractured image of what it used to be. And for Quincy, the consequences of his actions would last a lifetime, not only behind bars but in the emotional wreckage left in the wake of his decision. As the dust settled on Quincy Hayes's trial and sentencing, the tragedy of this case served as a harsh reminder of how deep secrets, unchecked emotions, and the crushing weight of betrayal can drive even the most composed individuals to take drastic, irreversible actions. Quincy's moment of rage, born from a father's love and the trauma inflicted on his son, cost him everything: his freedom, his family, and his place in the world he once controlled. But it also shattered Caleb's life, leaving him to navigate a future marred by abuse and the loss of his father. Though the law delivered its verdict, the scars left by this tragedy would echo for years to come. Quincy's journey from respected surgeon to convicted felon demonstrated just how fragile the line between justice and vengeance truly is. Could Quincy have handled the situation differently? Was there another way he could have fought for his son's well-being without resorting to murder? The questions remain unanswered, but one thing is clear. This case forces us to confront the lengths we would go to protect those we love in the face of unimaginable horrors. If this story shocked you, like and subscribe to Inspector Stan for more unsettling tales of justice, betrayal, and heartache.